Okay, so welcome to day one of the Boxing Day Test match, and something really interesting has happened today. Number one is that I don't really have an expert with me right now, and number two is that India have played really well on day one of the Boxing Day Test match, which historically has been a favorable ground for Australia. That being said, with the fiasco of the first Test match, coming into the second Test match without Virat Kohli, without Mohammad Shami, Ishant Sharma is not there in the team. So the team is pretty much depleted. And to come out of a defeat of the nature of what India got in Adelaide, getting skittled out for 36, and then to put up a performance like this, it is really heartening. So I think if you are an Indian fan, you should be very happy today with the kind of performance that India has given on day one. Number one, let me tell you what happened today if you haven't really watched the match. So Australia won the toss and they decided to bat first. MCG typically, I mean, in the last 4 or 5 test matches, it has been a high scoring first inning ground. So it was a bad toss to lose for India. And I think it was a good toss to win for Australia as well. Lekin, what happened during the course of the day is the Indian bowling department, it showed its step and they were able to get Australia all out for a under 200 total in about 70-72 overs. So even with respect to how much time the Indian bowlers have had to be on the ground, it was quite a good thing for India because in the second innings, their bowlers will be all fresh. So today let's just quickly. Obviously, you can see the numbers. You can go to Cricinfo and other sites, and you can see the numbers and the scores. But what we will quickly do is that we will check out 2 3 different aspects of why India was so good even after being depleted. Number one, obviously, is that Rahane, the captain, not the player, not the batsman so much, but obviously Rahane, the captain, has always been very impressive. If you remember the Test match in Dharamshala, where once again Virat Kohli went missing, I think it was an injury or something, and then Rahane took charge of that very tense series. Kuldeep Yadav was introduced in the team and then we saw a different Rahane as a captain. Maybe not as a player, but as a captain, definitely. So Rahane, the captain, actually I felt made the big difference. And then number two, I thought the revelation or the what already we had, but it took some time to discover, is the magic or the method of Ravi Ashwin. In the first test as well in Adelaide, I think Ravi Ashwin bowled beautifully on the first morning. This test match as well. I mean, last time that Ashwin played in MCG, I thought he had a really average or below average kind of a outing. But this time, I think Ravi Ashwin he played really well. First test match brought inside the first hour. In fact, brought inside the first 15-20 overs to bowl, and then to get one of the openers who was going quite well, to get you know Steve Smith for a duck. Uh, Many of you will not believe that the last time Steve Smith actually got a duck was in 2016. So you can imagine the kind of impact that a Steve Smith wicket can bring to you. And then once again getting Tim Payne, who was a very resolute low order batsman, at least in the last test match. I thought that he was the difference between the two teams. The way he sort of brought down the gap between India and Australia in the first innings, it really gave Australia a lot of hope. So I thought the three key wickets on day one MCG playing abroad, Indian finger spinner, always criticized by foreigner experts, especially Australian cricketers and etc. They would always draw out comparisons saying that Ravi Ashwin is only good in subcontinental conditions. He's not good in away conditions, or say how bad is he in away conditions. So I thought. Somewhere somewhere Ashwin was also hurt, and there were certain aspects of his game which he's built over a period of time. Fitness being one of them. Fitness definitely being one of them, and I think it's a combination of both the things that he's really turning the screws on. Australian batsmen. So we'll talk about that. Then we'll talk about this beautiful depth of quite contrary to popular opinion. It would have been about a decade ago or so. But if somebody would have to actually talk about the depth of Indian bowling, generally people will not talk about it. What is usually talked about is the depth of Indian batting. And classically, I mean, ever since the modern era cricket has started, since the 80s and stuff like that, it has always been the superstars of Indian batsmanship who've taken the world by surprise. Uh, the last, the latter half of of this decade actually, it has gone to the depth of Indian fast bowling specifically. So we'll talk about that a little bit, and then we'll talk about usual cliched aspirations of what and how India should you know do in the Test match going forward. And we'll talk a little bit about Pat Cummins because I thought that Pat Cummins, he's bowling like a dream. Possibly his rewards, barring the second inning of Adelaide, but he's really, really unplayable at this moment. So we'll talk about him, and then we will talk about Mayank Agarwal as well. So that is what I have on my mind. And so let's start with Rahane, the captain. I thought the first thing that Rahane did really well was the field placement. Now, generally, it is quite a cliched thing to say that the captain got the field placements right and stuff. But I will tell you one small difference between how Rahane was placing his fields versus how Virat Kohli would place his fields. So, there is a short leg fielder, forward short leg, and then there is a backward short leg. And then, obviously, for all the nudges that go between these two fielders, generally India would have a fielder on the boundary. So, if there is a nudge that goes in between of these two fielders, it would eventually result in a single. Here in this test match, what Rahane did is that he had that fielder slightly squarish, not exactly a fine leg position, but slightly behind square, and he plugged that gap between backward short leg and forward short leg, so that all those front foot or even the back foot nudges that fall between these two fielders, he quite adeptly was blocking it out, not giving away easy singles. And instead, he had the square leg fielder behind, giving the protection for sweep and other things, who was slightly towards mid wicket. Okay, so he was not behind square, he was in front of square, maybe not so much towards mid wicket, but slightly towards mid wicket. So that would give a nice cover to Ravi Ashwin to sort of bowl a slightly uh, aggressive line, and I say aggressive middle, often middle stump line, because that was the plan, that was the trap, that was the leg side trap with the loop, the bounce that Ravi Ashwin was generating. So I thought it was beautifully done, very subtle. It was not very obvious, but I thought this one small field change, even the, uh, I think Labuschagne, how Marcus Labuschagne got out to Mohammad Siraz, it was all part of a well thought out plan. And they realized their limitations of the bowling attack. So they attacked the stumps. They cut out the offside scoring opportunities. I don't remember an Australian cover drive or an Australian, barring Matthew Wade in the first hour or so, I don't remember a cover drive that an Australian batter played today, or a square cut, or a glide to the gully, or things like. These are the kind of shots that Australian batsmen they love to play. Instead, they were made to play on the leg side, on the front foot, and I think that's where the difference came. The number two, obviously, introducing Ravi Ashwin. We're in Melbourne. The first 10 overs, the ball was zipping around. There was a good bit of a bounce, and classically there would be a tendency to get carried away and to go towards your third seamer. What Ajinkya Rahane did was two things. Obviously, uh, all of us know that obviously on debut, Mohammad Shiraz possibly would be a touch nervous. So he allowed Mohammad Shiraz a little bit more time to sort of come into the game. Uh, and then he realized that Ravi Ashwin was bowling quite well. And with the kind of a little bit of a grass and a little bit of a moisture on that drop in pitch, uh, it would be a good ploy to sort of bring Ravi Ashwin in. And with the kind of history that MCG has had, uh, he basically baited Matthew Wade into getting into the that attacking mindset against Ashwin, which resulted in his wicket. And then obviously Ashwin got the wicket of Steve Smith, no doubts about it. He had Steve Smith. He had him, and we'll talk about it more in detail later. So I thought that move was a really good master stroke to bring your spinner as an attacking option. Is this something that I feel it's absolutely brilliant. Now, after this, what Rahane did uh, was not over bowling Bumrah. So if I remember in the last test match in Adelaide, I thought Virat Kohli also kind of over bowled Bumrah. Um, uh, he bowled 20 plus overs. Also, Bumrah had the highest number of overs in the first innings, etc. He was very clever about it. He did not over bowl Bumrah. I think Bumrah bowled around 16, 17 overs across four spells, spread over a 70 over mark and things. So I thought the way he was using Bumrah was pretty similar to how a Rohit Sharma generally uses Bumrah in short and fiery spells. And the result was obvious. In each of these spells, Bumrah came and he took a wicket, except for the second spell, which was a, but from an economy perspective, that was a tight spell. So I thought the way Bumrah was used, the 4 wickets of Bumrah, and Bumrah bowled 4 spells today. And if you go and in 3 of those spells, Bumrah actually got a wicket. So beautiful usage of Bumrah, I will say. And then India had 5 bowlers today, but Ajinkya Rahane did not fall in the 5 bowler trap. Now, what's a 5 bowler trap? When you have 5 bowlers, you tend to sort of redistribute unwanted work to the fifth bowler as well. So his lack of use of Ravindra Jadeja today, I thought was brilliant. Because when he saw that the 3 bowlers were on top, there was a tendency to get wickets. He did not bring Jadeja in because there was no need to bring him in. Till he saw that tailenders were there and possibly a left arm spinner slogging him, etc., towards the boundary will be difficult. So I thought very, very clever usage of Jadeja rather than very, very clever non-usage of Ravindra Jadeja. Because when you have resources, generally as a captain, you fall into the trap of using them. And by not using Ravindra Jadeja on day one, uh, that was a master stroke too. Now let's talk about Ravi Ashwin. First Test match he bowled beautifully. The way he set up Matthew Wade, or even Steve Smith, or even Tim Paine. If you look at all the 3 dismissals, you will realize that all the 3 batsmen basically missed the trajectory of the ball. So a spinner has to defeat the batsman in the air. And when we say this, what it means is that as a batsman, when you're playing, basically you take a guesstimate of the spot on the pitch where the ball is going to land. As a spinner, your guile lies in the fact that are you able to deceive the batsman in guessing the wrong spot on the pitch? And the larger that gap is, chances are that batsman will be in more trouble. Yeah. So, for example, if Steve Smith came onto the front foot, trying to flick it towards mid wicket, but the ball pitched in a little bit further away from him, which meant that allowed the ball to spin a little bit more, and hence Smith was not able to counter the spin. But because he was committed on the front foot, he had then to use his hands to maneuver it, and basically he guided the ball in the hands of the leg slip or the backward short leg. And the same thing happened with Tim Paine. There was bounce in the pitch, everything was there, but you need to deceive batsmen in the flight. Same with Matthew Wade. The mid wicket was pulled in very smartly. The square leg was back. So if Matthew Wade had to get a boundary, he had to actually drag the ball, not using sweep, which is one of his favorite strokes. But he had to basically charge. Once again, he got beaten in the flight. The ball pitched way, uh, further away from where he thought the ball would actually pitch, and therefore he had to play that almost like a drag, drag flick towards a mid wicket. It took the edge, it went up, and the catch was taken. So I thought beautiful bowling, the variations in pace, the variation in sort of uh, how the trajectory was varying. I even saw one ball where Chris Green went back to cut a ball and it spun back, and basically he did not get out. He was able to block it out off the middle stump. Now, in that ball also, what was happening is that Ashwin did not change the length. The length was the same, but the previous deliveries, they were loopy deliveries, which gave him the impression that he can actually go back and cut it off the back foot. But the one which he was barely able to sort of block out was a faster delivery of a foolish length. But he read the trajectory and he thought that it's a shortish ball, and therefore he went on the back foot. So these were the kind of things that Ravi Ashwin did today. So brilliant, brilliant bowling. I thought amazing. His 3-6 field was brilliant. The way the field, there were subtle changes in the field. He was basically asking batsmen to come at him and then play shots in the regions in the region where there were no fielders. So all marks to Ashwin. I thought his evolution as a spinner has been brilliant, and this Test match series, he has really, you know, come alive as a bowler in as a finger spinner, as an Indian finger spinner, bowling abroad, not on helpful pitches. Now let's talk about the depth of Indian bowling, and I will not say much. I always have maintained that India possibly has the best Test match attack in the world across all conditions. Most of the series that India has lost abroad is not because of the bowlers, it has been because of the batsmen. And right now, Indian batting is far, far more fragile as compared to the Indian bowling. And just think about it, that three of India's, uh, renowned fast bowlers are not there. Mohammad Shami is not there. Ishant Sharma, I think in the last 2-3 years, he's been the best test bowler that India has had. So Ishant Sharma is not there. And then Bhuvneshwar Kumar is not there. So three primary Indian fast bowlers, they're not there. And yet, this is an India which has been able to skittle out an opponent in their home ground on day one of a beautiful sunny day on MCG. It's not a cloudy edge Baston or uh, a graveyard of a pitch in Durban. It's a very, very good batting track, which is true, has something for everyone. And to get Australia out for 195 is commendable. I also think that the process that India has built in prepping up the faster bowlers has really helped. So, for example, all the India A tours or the involvement of Rahul Dravid, etc., at a India A level or even at under 19 level, letting those bowlers mature not just in a domestic or a Ranji environment, but also kind of go abroad and face Australia A, South Africa A, get a hang of those pitches before you actually turn up for the internationals. I think those are the kind of prolonged exposures you will have to give people rather than just a 2-day practice session in MCG or a 3-day practice session in MCG. That is not really going to help. So I think kudos to the structural change that India has made. And number two, I think overall the fitness revolution, especially in the fast bowler category that India has brought in, it's really healthy. I mean, I was just looking at Mohammad Shiraz today, and he looks absolutely ripped. Even Navneet Saini, he's a very, very fit man. When you look at Mohammad Shami, I think his whole career changed when he got fitter and stuff like that. So these are the things, the whole fitness piece that has got into the Indian faster bowlers, plus the exposure to the Sena countries under A series, etc. It's really, really helped. But I cannot imagine a similar scenario where Australia has lost, say, Josh Hazelwood and Pat Cummins, and I cannot actually see two fast bowlers coming in and doing this to other teams. I don't see it. And same goes for England as well. I don't see that. If they play without James Anderson or Stuart Broad, or for instance, even Jofra Archer in today's time, if they lose two fast bowlers, I don't know how they are going to back it up. And look at what happened to South Africa. So I think that talks about the depth of the Indian bowling as well. So full marks to BCCI for really making those structural changes. And now I think in situations like this, you actually really see the result of it. Now, going forward, obviously, I think India has to bat well tomorrow. Mayank Agarwal has a has had a little bit of a rough time in Australia so far with his periscopic bat and all of that. And it happens, I think. See, opening the batting is not an easy task. The first 2 3 overs, even Shubman Gill was all over the place. And if the catch was taken by Labuschagne in the slips, uh, with all the compactness and how beautiful he looks on the eye, Shubman Gill would have been back in the house. So sometimes what happens is that some players, they look awkward and they get out, and then it really allows other people to come in, the experts to come in to expose those chinks in the armor. Mayank Agarwal has played in Australia. He's played well. He's a good batsman. This has been a tough series for openers, mind you. Even the Australian openers, Joe Burns or Matthew Wade, they have played in Australia all their life. If they are struggling, and then obviously the quality of the first over that Mitchell Stark produced today, it was just too good. It was just too good. Every ball was a wicket-taking ball. The third ball of that inning, that in-swinging Yorker, what a beautiful ball it was. I thought that Mayank's gone for all the money, but I mean, see, it happens. It was a beautiful over, and at the end of it, he could have survived. Unfortunately, he got out. So I think Mayank Agarwal should be left alone. He plays a really good. He is an aggressive opener, and he plays spin really well. So let's leave him aside. But yeah, India need to bat well, and India need to bat aggressive. Um, Key will be Cheteshwar Pujara, and I think lower down the order, Pant, Jadeja, and Ashwin. These three as batsmen, they have to score at least 100 runs, because that's the whole point of dropping Saha and then bringing in both Jadeja as well as Ashwin into the team. So as a unit, these three, they have to score a century, 33 runs each. If that is done, say if not 100, at least 75, 80 runs. I think the work of the work will be done. And if India manage to reach 300 runs in the first inning, 100, 10 run lead, I think it will be sufficient. In the second inning, if Australia bat well, they will score about 240, 250, and then we can obviously score 150 in the last innings. And mind you, we're batting last, so it's not really going to be that easy if the chasing target is above 150. So that is that. And before I kind of close for today, uh, I mean, generally I watch test matches for the beauty of the bowling, the movement that happens, and the zip which is there. And a long time ago, I remember Steve Harmison was bowling to Jack Callis. Jack Callis already had a century under his belt in that innings, and then he bowled an over which was absolutely unplayable. Jack Callis was not able to play it at all, and I think it was happening in South Africa. That is the kind of bowling that we viewers or the real lovers of Test cricket, we get into watch. And I thought, while Mitchell Stark, the first over was brilliant, it was beautiful. It was everything that a textbook writer will expect a left arm fast bowler to do in the first over of a Test cricket. But after that, the beauty of the bowling that Pat Cummins brought in, the kind of deliveries that he's bowled today, I will request you to just plug into the highlight package and then just watch it. The sort of bowling that Pat Cummins has done today, it's unplayable. His over pitch deliveries, his good length deliveries. I saw Matthew Wade was sorry, Tim Paine was basically collecting them above his head. That was the kind of carry and zip that Pat Cummins was producing today. He also got one delivery to pitch on middle and leg stump, and then to curl away from there like a proper leg spinner. And it was the same ball that Shubman Gill tried to play a flick to mid wicket, edged it, got dropped by Labuschagne. That's the kind of beauty. And see, those kind of deliveries, they get bold. But in England and New Zealand, where there is a plenty of swing, not in Australia. So the sort of deliveries that Pat Cummins has bowled at such amazing consistency. I mean, if you just look at it, it looks innocuous, but when you look at the trajectory of the ball, it leaves his hand, curls in ever so slightly, and then from that angle, it just straightens out. Most of the time, it straightens out, and when it actually nips back in, then you see dismissals like that of Prithvi Shaw or even Mayank Agarwal in the first inning. And then you say that, the technique is bad and all, which is there, but just admire the bowling of Pat Cummins. I think he is currently the number one rated bowler in the world in Test cricket, and that rating basically gets driven by the number of wickets, etc., which you take. But I think just for the joy of watching fast bowling, you should see Pat Cummins. He's been absolutely brilliant. Just enjoy his bowling, and we will see you tomorrow after day two. And we hope that India actually bat well, and they bat with confidence and aggression. They have the right depth in the batting, and if they score 300 runs tomorrow, bring Australia back into batting in the last session, things will get interesting in favor of India. So see you tomorrow then.